Ladies and gentlemen, we're about to begin the funeral service. We ask for those that have a cell phone or pager, if you could turn it to the silent mode. Officiating is Rabbi Elliot Weinschneider.
Microphone's okay? Mizmor LeDavid, Adonai ro'i lo achsar. B'noseh she'er b'tzeni, hamei menuchos yinai eleni. Nafshi yeshovev yancheni b'maglei tzedek l'ma'an shemo. Gam ki ele b'chei tzalmovas lo yirara ki ata imadi. Shiftecha mishantecha hemi yanachemuni. Taroch lefanai shulchan neged tzararoi. Yishanta b'shem roshi kosar rivaya. Ach tov v'chesed yirafuni kol yemei chaya. V'shafti b'veis Adonai li'arech yamim. A song of David. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not lack. God causes me to lie down in lush pastures. God leads me beside tranquil waters. God restores my soul and guides me in righteous paths for God's name's sake. Though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Your scepter and staff, they comfort me. You prepare a table before me in full view of my adversaries. You have anointed my head with oil. My cup runneth over. My only goodness and kindness pursue in all the days of my life. And I shall dwell in the house of the Lord for the length of my days. Amen. My briefcase just walked off. Oh, I think I better wear glasses. Nice. Adonai ma'adam v'tachshveu, chenosh v'tachshveu, adam l'hevel damus, yamav ketzel over, b'boker yatzis v'cholaf, erev yomalav yavesh. O Lord, what is man that takes knowledge of him, or the son of man that you make account of him? Man is like a passing shadow. He's here today and gone for tomorrow. You know, it's an interesting Talmud. It talks about shadows. The Talmud seems to feel that there are three types of shadows: the shadow of a bird in flight, the shadow of a wall, and the shadow of a palm tree. Each one is a little different. The shadow of a bird is here today and he's gone tomorrow. As the bird flies, so the shadow flies. The shadow of a wall in the heat of the day is of very little use. Only in the morning, early morning, and late afternoon does it have value. But under the shade of a palm tree, there's always shade, there's always comfort. You know, I've known Marvin for many, many years. He was the vice president of our shul, but that's not really where I met him. I met him when I was about 12 years old, which is about 60 years ago. He was a very important person in my life. He was actually my television repairman, and he would come in. He was quite famous when he would come in, and he was a shadow always in our life. He remained a shadow, not just here today and gone tomorrow. Whenever we'd see him, we were always excited about him because he did fix our TVs, important in those days. And it wasn't just when he was in youth, it was all through his life. Later, of course, when I became a rabbi at Mishnah Gemara, the shul, he was my vice president, and he stayed my vice president for all those years. We tried to get him to become the president. He wouldn't do it. He didn't want to. But he was the vice president for many, many years. You know, people have different approaches in life. In last week's parsha, we learned about Chayei Sarah. Sarah's life, and the Torah says, "Vayu Chayei Sarah mea shana ve'esrim shana v'sheva shanim b'shnei Chayei Sarah." It says that Sarah was 100 years and 20 years and 7 years. These were the days of Sarah, all the days of Sarah. Of course, all the commentators ask the question, why don't they just say 127 years? Why 120 and 7? It seems repetitious. The Torah doesn't do that. So what was the point of 120 and 7? So Rashi, the commentary, points out that at 100 years old, she was like 20, and at 20, she was like 7. What does that mean? When she was 100 years old, she had great wisdom. When she was 20 years old, she had beauty. And when she was 7 years old, she had innocence. And those things stayed with her entire life. She was 100, she was 20, and she was 7. You know, a 7-year-old is an age of purity and innocence. There's a certain innocence that a 7-year-old has. At 20, there's a beauty. And there's also an urge to move forward. You're excited about life. You're full of idealism, etc. And at 100, you're full of wisdom. Sarah Imenu, Sarah, our mother, was all those things all her life. Kol Yimei Shama. All the years of her life, she was 100, she was 20, she was 7. She never lost her wisdom, her idealism, her will to live, and her belief in Hashem. You know, a child has a deep, deep belief for God. They really believe that when they daven, Hashem hears their words and answers them very often. And this is something that, as we get older, we get jaded, we kind of forget that. Sarah was like 7 her entire life. She always would talk to God. She always expected an answer. Well, I'd like to say that Marvin was that way as well, in many respects. He was a true believer in Hashem. He would always pick himself up and start over. When I mentioned he was the television repairman, that worked until they began phasing out people that fixed anything. You know, he realized suddenly that he had a room full of tubes for the television that he could no longer use. So he picked himself up and he did other things. He got involved in the shul, he got involved in learning, he got involved in many things in the community. He was always a doer and always a mover. He loved his family, he loved his shul, he loved his wife. He was always very close with his wife, and he went to great lengths to see to it that she was cared for. He was extremely patient. I learned a lot from him in how he would do that. So Marvin was a wonderful man, and he'll be sorely missed by all of us. And he lived to 94, but they were young years. All of his years were youthful in that sense. He had 3 children. Linda, the oldest, married to Ira Neiman. Paul, married to Michelle Malka. I knew some of them better than others. I knew Paul because he sat on my side of the mechitza in shul, although I did know also Malka a little bit because I saw her occasionally once at her birthday party for him a few months ago, and also at the hospital, and her daughter. So I do know the family, but mainly I knew Marvin and I knew his wife, his wonderful wife, who he was so devoted to, so devoted. You know, and she'd repeat over things that happened in Europe during the war. He would listen over to many of the same stories I remember, and he was very patient. He listened with such interest in what she was saying. It was beautiful to see. And we were very, very, very moving to watch. Marvin was a person who was brought up in America when people weren't supposed to be Orthodox Jews. It was impossible in those days to really be an Orthodox Jew. Yet he He was. He stayed true to his religion when it wasn't particularly popular. And he never really lost his faith. You know, in our age of semi-permanence, in which there are too many disrupted families, a generation that Dr. Avram Tversky called the throwaway generation, if it doesn't work, don't fix it. Just throw it away and get a new one, sort of like the televisions that he used to fix. In these times and in this atmosphere, Chayasora comes to remind us it's a refreshing message of endurance. And this message was true for Mr. Schlanger as well. He endured through a lot of difficulty. He changed his life when the television ended. He changed his life into spending time doing chesed, working for the shul. He and his wife were mainstays of our congregation. They were there constantly, taking care of things, fixing things. Mr. Schlanger could fix things. Mr. Schlanger was making our kiddush every week. Every week she'd make the kiddush for us. And they were very, very involved in the shul in the process. I never saw him get upset. Things went well for him, or it didn't go well for him. He kept his equilibrium, and he tried as best he could. So when we say that man is like a passing shadow, I like to think that we say tzaddik hatamer yifroch. A palm tree is like a tzaddik. A tzaddik is like a palm tree. That the shade under a palm tree is always there. The shade under the palm tree is always there. Under its lofty branches, one can always find shade and comfort. And this again was true for Mr. Schlanger. One always found an ear, someone we could talk to, we had a problem, we could talk to him about it. He lived to 94, but Baruch Hashem, his mind was clear. And he was someone that I could go to for an eitzah, for advice on the shul, advice in general, and I'm glad that I was able to associate with him. We are privileged to have some of his children and grandchildren that want to say some words, so I'm going to give up the podium temporarily. Paul is going to speak first, and Paul is his son. And I'll take over again in a few minutes, but go ahead.
The Gemara in Bab Basra, Daf Yud, Ki had Yosef prayed Rabbi Yeshua Chalash Inged Amar Le Avua Maichazis. So Yosef was sick. He went to, very temporarily, when he was sick, he got to see what they were saying in the next world. What they were saying. Amar Le, Olam Hafuch Reisa. He said he saw the way it was, what they were saying in the next world. That many, many things in this world are actually the opposite, as it's viewed, as it's deemed above. Olam hafuch reisa. Elyonim lamata. There are some who are viewed as being the best, but in the next world they're not. Tachtonim lamala. There are some who are in this world who are tachtonim, mediocre, but lamala they are considered to be the best. Amar le olam, the response in the Gemara was olam barari, so you've seen the truth. You've seen the truth. Though my father was always humble and shunned honor, he lived his life as a person who, while in this world, was recognized only as an ordinary person, as a tachton. But in reality, he was the Elyon, person who was amongst the most significant above. My father showed tremendous honor towards his father, Isaac Schlanger, who was in and out of the hospital for many years. He lived a very painful ending to his life. My father was the one and the only one who attended to all of the health needs of his father with complete dedication to his father at all times until he died in 1981. He loved his mother, Anna Schlanger, and was completely devoted to honoring her in any and all ways, doing any and all tasks for her until she died in 1996. Now, as some of you might know, my parents, my father, were the ones who handled the influx of Russians to provide them their education. You know, in 1990, there was thousands of Russians who moved in, and they needed education. And there wasn't a source to provide that education. My mother and my father provided the education to these Russian immigrants, and they never got paid. To many, they were saying, how can we handle it? What can we do? Well, there was one person who didn't look at the impossibility of the task, but instead embraced the task and did it for everybody in the city and provided a schools for the city. Some of you might also know my father was amongst the earliest joggers when nobody would jog. Nobody would do exercise. They used to tell me at Mather Park that they would see this person jogging around the park before nobody was jogging. He was the first one. He exemplified v'chai b'hem. If anybody knew his diet, it was almost gross. I mean, it was like he had a blender of vegetables. I couldn't barely even look at it. I mean, he was just so careful to eat anything that was totally healthy. And he judged every little bit that came in his body as being, is this totally healthy? Can I eat something more healthy? He exemplified the mitzvah of v'chai b'hem, sometimes driving me crazy because I couldn't bear it. But anyway, that was him. And then he lived a very difficult ending to his life. Even though his first 94 years and a couple months were very good, it was a very difficult ending. The last couple months. His heart failure and his body was giving out and providing him tremendous pain. And he lived through all the pain. And I have the notes from his last night, Thursday night. The Dr. Posner was in the room. There was Bridget, the chief nurse of the hospital, Glenbrook. There was another nurse, as well as several members of the family. And I have in my notes, I was writing down that he was extremely uncomfortable. That's what the doctor said. This was not working. That was not working. It was a state of emergency. Nothing was working anymore. I remember I said to Dr. Posner, see what you can do, try, but have somebody coming in to see him every hour. They agreed to do that. And ultimately, everything collapsed. He didn't have a pulse, but he fought to the very end. He exemplified v'chai b'hem, living in every way. He never gave in. He endured the pain, extraordinary pain at the very end. But he never gave in. He only died after everything gave out on him. His heart, his pulse, everything gave out. But he endured the pain and lived through it and lived to the end when nothing was working anymore. In shul, he sat next to at B'nai Ruvain Rabbi Shlomo Rappaport, the principal of the Ida Crown Academy, the president of the CRC. That was the person that he sat next to in shul for all the years. And he was always respected at shul, even though he never received the honors at shul. My children, Azriel, Amy, Julie, Chava, and Bashi, always felt a special bond with their Saba, and always had the highest reverence towards their Saba, whom they loved so very much with all of their hearts. So much love towards their Saba. They loved him so much. Even at my young age, when I was just 7, 8, and 9 years old, my father insisted on my spending all of my hours after school at Hillel Torah learning with a chavrusa, Gemara, which he would set up for me. He set up every night that I'd be learning Gemara. I didn't know what learning Gemara meant, but he set it up for me every day, without fail. And even during summer vacation, I still remember he just came over to me and said, I set up for you to learn, and that's what you're going to do this summer. This goes back to the very early 1970s, when there wasn't even a single established base medrash in Chicago. My father made the highest standards without regards to what was the usual norm. My father never spoke lashon hara, speaking negatively about anyone. Ever, not once had one bad word about anyone, ever. Not one bad word ever. I remember going to my grandmother's house. My grandmother from my mother, Elka Rivkin. And for those who know, my uncle knows, Elka, she was always an early riser in the morning, and she was an early person. And she criticized my father for being late because he started late and worked late. That was always his way. So she would criticize, my father would never, ever say a word back to her. Never. He just wasn't the same. He had a different schedule. But he had a respect for her. He had that respect for her. And so if she would criticize him, he let it go, never said a word to us, was always extremely happy that we would then go and be close to my grandmother. He just wouldn't say a bad word about anybody. He couldn't do it. Couldn't. Under any circumstances, no matter what. My father loved learning Torah and himself spent many hours each day learning Gemara, listening to Gemara Shiurim, and reviewing what he learned. My father grew up in the Great Depression, and he told me that he didn't feel like he was poor because nobody else had any money. He started working at age 12, fixing radios, since his family needed him to make some money. Then he went on to a career fixing TVs at a time when TVs were an expensive commodity, very big and bulky. He was always honest in his business and valued his honesty in his business practices. My father was a regular at shul, both in the morning and in the evening, and on Sundays, where he would stay on many hours after minyan to fix any mechanical issues which needed repair. I remember he would come back usually about 11:15 or 11:30 he would just stay on, never came back early. My father was always involved in the community and could always be counted on to help Mishnah Gemara to make the minyan or in any other way he could help. I remember when I would come back from work, I used to park in front of the garage. There was a couple times where he got to shul, where he was up before me, and he got mad at me. I want to ask for Mechila, Dad, for making you wait those extra few minutes because I didn't come out early enough to move my car, and you had to be late, and you were mad at me, and rightfully so, because you wanted to be early to minyan every day. And I apologize that that there was a couple times where I didn't move my car from in front of the garage. My father felt a special bond towards his recently deceased cousin, Marty Fishman, and also with people here today. His first cousin, Bobby Israel, Sherwin Feldstein, Stephen Feldstein, and he loved Marvin Israel as well. And he was very close towards his first cousin, Alvin Israel, alav hashalom. My father always appreciated having a very special brother-in-law, my Uncle Bernie, who has been there every step of the way. My father didn't have the money of many others, so he saved what he could, and he had the necessary money to support the family. My father loved the Shabbat and was always very radiant and very joyous during the entirety of the Shabbat. My father befriended people who didn't have money and were down and out, to then raise them up and give them a new and better chance to succeed. The best friend of those who were homeless previously, and I'm not exaggerating, literally homeless. The best friend of those who were homeless and or down and out was always my father, who cared the most about the people who were neglected the most. Dad, I love you. I will always love you. You will always be remembered as the pillar and strength of the family. No one could bear to say goodbye. We will always remember you as an inspiration for us and in the future. Your youngest grandchild, your beloved Pashi, always loved and admired you. You were always there for us. Always.
I learned how to perform proper kibbud av va'em, honor and respect to my parents, by watching how both of my parents were incredibly devoted to their own parents. I will always be grateful to my parents for the sacrifices they made to give me the best Torah education. First at Beis Yaakov on Granville, and then at Hannah Sachs, which at that time was the girls' school of the Ida Crown Jewish Academy. And that's the way he always referred to it, as the girls' school. It was not the path that anyone in their crowd, in my parents' crowd, had taken with their children's education, but as the youngest child, these decisions were reflective of my parents' own trajectory. My parents embraced Torah learning, and my father was constantly learning and growing by going to shiurim and listening to Torah tapes. My father got deep pleasure from learning the depth of Torah with commentaries and also emphasized the importance of fully understanding the breadth of pshat. My father was not only learned, he put into action what he knew. For example, he was meticulous about shtayim she'ochlim biyachad, and thus made sure that there was always a Dvar Torah during a meal that he shared with at least one other person. Over the past year or two, when I would check in with my father about how he was doing, he would define a good day versus a difficult day based upon whether or not he was able to go to shul that day. I fondly remember the cousins' clubs that my father used to have and how he so enjoyed catching up with all his cousins. We loved spending birthdays and holidays together with both my parents, and I felt so fortunate to have both of them with me. I spent my birthday with them this past September, and in the in the spirit of how I saw my parents treat their parents, I always made sure to say a special thank you to my parents on my birthday. He was a self-taught expert in herbal medicine and would read books about health and medicine, following in the footsteps of his father, Isaac Schlanger, alav shalom, who was both a chiropractor and a tailor. My father subscribed to Prevention Magazine in addition to Consumers Reports and Time Magazine. He was always on the lookout for the latest in health-related research. He used his treadmill until earlier this year, and his recumbent bike until maybe a month or two ago. It did him well to take care of his body, and he, like my brother said, he took very seriously v'chai b'hem, and he was zocha to live until age 94. In his very upper 80s, my father learned how to use a smartphone, and he marveled at the advances in technology, all the way back from the days of radio communications. Long before it became popular, he would go for his daily jog, and he would come home to have a green smoothie, which my mother would have pre-prepared in the blender. My father was so proud of all his children and his grandchildren and his great-grandchildren, and he was zocha to see many of them get married to their b'shar. He was especially proud of his great-grandchildren and the fact that 2 of his grandchildren and 4 of his great-grandchildren were living in Israel. Of course, they were far away, and he wouldn't see them too often. Video communications did help with that, but he felt so strongly in the 94 years of his life that with where things were in 1930 and where things are now and with the state of Israel, that he knew we're in the Yemos HaMashiach. When my granddaughter came to visit for the first time on Pesach, my father remarkably had no difficulty relating to a 1-year-old. He found ways to captivate her interests by showing her how to play with the magnets on the fridge, play make-believe with a stuffed bear, and look at family photo cards. Hadassah had fun playing with Saba and Savta and created a new game of pulling at Saba's nose, which all of us were amused by. My parents celebrated 65 years of marriage in August of this year. Their relationship was noted by those on the inside for their mutual respect and love, which transcended time and youth. When he was in the hospital, he felt badly about not having the strength to daven. I tried to reassure him that it was perfectly fine and he was not expected to do so at this point. Since I knew it was important to him, though, I would say the Shema out loud for him to listen to. Despite his shortness of breath, he said every word along with me and did so by heart. When I was at Glenbrook Hospital with him on his final Shabbos, he was happy to hear Kiddush, and he said it along with me. And he did not eat after Shabbos until he heard Havdalah. My father loved being around other people and was truly interested in others' activities, experiences, thoughts, and feelings. He was very accepting of all people and brought out their strengths. I grew up seeing constant examples of chesed. Both of my parents were always on the lookout for opportunities to help those in the community whose needs were significant but seemingly invisible. My father was excellent at problem solving and relished helping people get through tough situations. I attribute my career choice of clinical psychology to the values that both of my parents instilled in me. When I was in high school, every morning, my father would pick up a blind man in the community and bring him to shul at B'nai Ruvain. I personally saw the dignity with which he accorded as he did this when the Hannah Sachs girls would occasionally daven at B'nai Ruvain. He did this for years until the blind man's health declined significantly and he was no longer able to come. I would like to thank Rabbi Wolf and the Chicago Mitzvah Campaign for guidance and support through the past few months, whenever needed, as we were navigating difficult and complex terrain. You helped me carry out one of his last verbal requests and provided a kosher-certified pureed fish dinner within 2 hours of expressing my quandary. I would like to thank Rabbi Matzliach and Chicago Hatzalah for their professionalism and sensitivity throughout the years whenever my father had an emergency and needed to be taken to the hospital. There are so many people to thank, so I'm just going to leave it to a minimum, and I ask forgiveness in advance for the many, many people that I'm not mentioning. Decades ago, my parents wrote letters and advocated for the freedom of Russian Jews. They did not stop there, as my parents realized that after many of them acquired their freedom and came to the U.S., they had no knowledge about the practice of Judaism. Working together with Rabbi Natak and Mrs. Kosovsky of Free, my parents took the lead and taught Russian boys and girls to read Hebrew, about the beauty of Torah and mitzvos, and prepared the boys for their bar mitzvah. I remember my father teaching the boys to put on tefillin and going each Shabbos to a different boy's bar mitzvah. At the tender age of 12 and 13, my parents were already telling their students that when they get older, they need to marry Jewish. Befittingly, the night nurse at the hospital was a Russian Jew who connected deeply to my father, not knowing anything about his past. While we tried our best to make my father's pain bearable, my father gave a fellow Jew the opportunity to do an everlasting mitzvah, a chesed shel emes. She connected especially well with my father. With kindness and sensitivity, Luba did her duties on Thursday night into Friday morning, and she had tears in her eyes after my father passed away. My father's deep desire that every Jewish person be connected with Torah and mitzvos came out in some of the most unusual situations. When we went to the bank several months ago, there was a nice-looking young banker who was helping us. When my father found out that he was Jewish Russian, he told me that I must work on connecting him with Yiddishkeit. Months later, my father followed up with me about the seemingly random banker to make sure that I had done my duty, and I did. Last Wednesday, Rabbi Chaim Shanowitz, the chaplain of Glenbrook Hospital, came to visit, even though it was so hard for my father to breathe by that point. He was interested in putting on tefillin. He said the bracha on Hanachas tefillin, and then proceeded to say the full Shema with all the paragraphs, which he knew so well. Thank you, Daddy, for creating and leaving such an incredible legacy of Torah and mitzvos for the entire family. Baruch Hashem, all of his children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren are all going in the Torah way completely. And may this legacy continue, L'dor v'dor u'la'ol me'ad. And so now my sons, who are Kohanim, are going to be speaking from the Kohen room. I hope we're able to see it okay.
Okay, can they see? Probably. Guess they can see. Oh. My name is Tuvia, and I am a grandchild of the late Marvin. I am first going to share some words from my sister, Eliza, who is in Israel and was unable to make it, and then some words for myself. For my sister, Saba was such a special person. We were so fortunate to have him with us for the past many years. He grew up in America in the 1930s and 40s, and he and Savta were unique in that they were Shomer Shabbos. He taught by example from all his and Savta's chesed, making bar mitzvahs and continuing Torah learning in classes even when he was weak. Saba was a shining example for shalom bayis. Whenever I called, he would speak for a minute, then call for Savta so we could all speak together. Saba was also so sweet with his great-grandchild, Hadassah. He was loving and knew exactly what would be the perfect toy. Saba showed us so much love and care, interest in our lives, and was proud of everything we did. We love you, Saba, and miss you. Now I'm... Oh, wait. Coming in for the screen? Are you coming in for the screen? Yeah. Oh, can they see? Oh, okay, so I just spoke on behalf of my sister, and they will listen, and I'm gonna give them... Oh, so they can see? What? Okay, okay, she was telling, okay. All right. Okay, now here are some words I wrote for my Saba. Saba, you were the best grandfather I could have ever asked for. You and Savta were always there for me from a young age, doing whatever you could to make my siblings and me happy, while also helping drive me to thrive academically at every single grade and throughout college. I cherish all of our time spent together and all of your encouragement. You were always so positive towards me and made me feel like I could excel in school no matter what. You also raised my mother, who has been my rock, always there for me no matter what, and giving me the world and more. You were one of the most determined people I knew, and you never let your age stop you. Even in your mid-80s, you would go up on the roof and up ladders to make fixes in the garage, as well as making sure to exercise daily. About 10 years ago, when you were fixing something in the garage and fell down the ladder, you were forced to go into the nursing home to recover. But when you were well enough, you were determined to not let your medical condition or your fall stop you. This is something that has always resonated with and inspired me. 2 summers into my time at the University of Miami, I found myself going to your house multiple times a week. I didn't want to go back to Miami and be so far away. So I ended up taking a semester off from UM and continued getting to see you and help you around the house throughout the week. From helping you take care of virtual errands to teaching you about tech and having Savta pop her head in to share her infectious smile, her warm hugs, and to make sure we were well fed, I cherished every moment of our time together. Your passion for TVs and innovation mix well with my tech nerdiness. About 6 years ago, I gave Safta my old Android phone, and within weeks, it became your computer. You had never owned a computer before, and you loved reading news, watching news videos, and watching Shiurim on your computer. Soon, I got you a Fire Stick, a Chromecast, and an iPad, which we had so much fun setting up. You were becoming the most technologically advanced man in their upper 80s and then 90s I had ever heard of. Technology is a passion of mine, and I absolutely loved how happy technology made you. You also helped me discover my passion for teaching the elderly about technology, which I plan to continue in the future. I ended up finishing college off in Champaign and was grateful to be closer to you and the rest of the family. My time in college was difficult to say the least, from breaking 11 bones to being in a major highway car crash, but you supported me through it all, providing resources to be able to thrive beyond my adversity and excel in university. You never let your age stop you from doing the things you loved, and I was always inspired by that resilience, helping me push through my adversity. After college, I moved to New York and then to Philadelphia for work, and leaving you was incredibly challenging. But our connection remained strong, and you gave me a fun challenge of helping you with tech from afar. Over the phone, when we would speak, I loved telling you about my work and about my accomplishments at my company, Accenture, because every time I did, it made you so happy. I loved making you proud. About a month ago, I heard from my mother about how you had been diagnosed with congestive heart failure. That night, I called you to check in on you, and you said you needed to go to the hospital. I called my mom, who immediately called Hatzela, and then I booked a one-way ticket to Chicago for the next day in order to support you at the hospital. I wanted so desperately for you to get better. I was so determined to be there by your side, no matter what. I spent the last 3+ weeks with you. Soon after getting to the hospital, you were determined to get out of the hospital ASAP and return to normal functioning. You fought very hard to get back home, and you went back home after less than a week in the hospital. Spending Shabbat with you in West Rogers Park right after you were discharged was a Shabbat I'll remember fondly for the rest of my life. Despite your condition, you were determined to go back to a normal way of life, which included going up and down your tall, slippery staircase. When you realized your children and grandchildren were too nervous for you to go up and down the staircase, you didn't want to make us nervous, so you fell asleep downstairs. And then, the second we left, you went upstairs. This showed your respect for us, as well as your great determination to return to normal life. I spent the next day, Sunday, spent the whole day with you. We tidied up your house together, went through physical mail, as well as the dozens of missed voicemails from when you were at the hospital. And I fixed some of the tech devices that I had gotten you and that we had used together for the past number of years. It really seemed like a typical visit, and I was optimistic that life would return to normal, minus the added medication and monitoring for the congestive heart failure. Monday night, Unfortunately, many of your breathing difficulties resumed, and unfortunately, the next morning, you fainted. The following 2.5 weeks in the hospital were not easy at all for you. Your care unfortunately started with medical malpractice, causing you pain I cannot fathom, but you kept fighting. My mother, my cousin Chava, and I worked tirelessly to be able to get you transferred to a hospital that, Baruch Hashem, took better care of you. I know that it was not easy at all, and I wanted to be by your side, filling in for the patient care technician and advocating for you to your nurses throughout the day. I am so grateful to have had the opportunity to be by your side. The hospital was a grueling place, but you pushed through for 2.5 weeks, always making a Kiddush Hashem by showing your appreciation for the medical staff. On Thursday afternoon of last week, when I got to the hospital, your oxygen levels were unbelievably low, much lower than I had ever seen, and you were in the worst state I have ever seen. I held your hand tight, reassured you that I love you very much, kissed your forehead, and prayed that you will get better. Despite your immense difficulty breathing and low oxygen level, you said to me, "Tuvia, don't leave me." Those were some of the last words I heard from you. I held your hand and reassured you that I would continue to stay by your side. Though you are no longer with us, our bond will live on forever. My family and I advocated for you till your last breath, and you managed to live 12 more hours despite none of us knowing if you would live even another minute. I am incredibly sad from your passing, but your situation taught me quite a bit, and what I learned is something that I will remember for the rest of my life. Especially how your situation allowed me to see the true essence of Kibud Aveim, honoring parents, through my mother's absolute dedication to making sure you got the best care possible. I saw my mother make 40 plus calls a day for you, from consulting with your doctors to reaching out to all different caregivers and home health care for you, so that when you get discharged from the hospital, you have hospital level care from home, to setting up home hospice nurses when hospice seemed like the best option, when home hospice seemed like the best option, and to setting up in-hospital hospice when that seemed like the best option. All that while also arranging care for Safta. My mother embodied true Kibud Aveim that I am so grateful to have had the opportunity to see. And I appreciate you giving her that opportunity. It inspired me to want to provide the same for my parents after 120 years of health. Your situation also brought the family together. My mom, Chava, and Uncle Paul worked together seamlessly throughout the last 3.5 weeks, making sure you had the best care. And I am so grateful that you brought us all together. Saba, I love you very much, and I will miss you dearly.
Saba, you were always a problem solver. You tried to make the best of everything that you had. You instilled in us a love of curiosity, problem solving, and just really taking everything that you had and making the most of it. From using the laundry chute to create airflow during the stuffy summers, to fixing a chandelier together that an electrician gave up on. These are the memories that I will not forget. Although the past few months were difficult physically, your mind was strong. We discussed words of Torah, and I will not forget that. I couldn't share these words on Friday, these words of Torah on Friday, but I have a final opportunity. In this past week's Parsha, we read about Shnei Chayei Sarah. So, right, the Torah says Sarah lived 100 years, 20 years, and 7 years. As Rashi famously says, that when she was 100, she was like 20. When she was 20, she was like 7. The Chassam Sofer explains that although things get hard when one gets old, it's hard to move. It's, the mind can get cloudy. Baruch Hashem, your mind was clear until the end. It makes it hard to perform mitzvahs. But Sarah nevertheless did perform them when she was 100 with the enthusiasm of someone who was 20. You modeled this for us. Even at the very end, within the last few months, you davened daily, you put on tefillin, you said Kiddush, Shema. And even though it was so difficult for you, it was so important. You did it with the alacrity of someone who's 20 years old. And this is something I'll be forever grateful for. And this is something that I'll never forget. And I think all your grandchildren, all your friends, we all saw this, and hopefully this will be a model for us for the rest of our lives.
As everyone who has met my Saba knows, he was a very special, lively person. He helped shape me into who I am today in so many ways. He helped make it possible for me to go to college in San Diego and succeed in many aspects of my life. He shared his wisdom and exemplified so many wonderful midos and truly embraced mitzvos and embodied Simchas HaChaim, no matter his circumstances, qualities that I strive to mirror every day. He was a light in my life from the day I was born. I remember going to his house as a kid and playing with all the fun toys he had. I remember him showing me and my siblings how to use his treadmill and him supervising us on it because we loved to come over and use it. I remember when we moved to Las Vegas, him and my Safta visiting for Pesach and him leading the Seder with my dad, and visiting for Hanukkah with lots of toys that he would play with together after lighting the menorah. I remember playing Monopoly together and building little toy cars for a school project together. I remember being so excited to see Saba every day when he would visit us that I would often be his wake-up call. Later, when I moved to Chicago, he and my Safta opened their home for me until I got situated, and I was still always so excited to see Saba each day and spend Sundays together each week. I remember overhearing him on the phone talking so kindly about me and many others. I've missed that time together since moving to New York, and now I will miss them even more. I'm glad I still have voicemails he left me, saying how he's looking forward to see me and talk to me, and how happy and proud he was in so many special moments in my life. And that's how I will remember him. Saba, I know that you will find peace in Shemayim, knowing what an impact you had in this world and the amount of elevation you brought to it. Thank you for everything you've done for me and for your family and community.
I have some words from my mother, who was not able to come here today. She wanted to say, Marvin was a wonderful father-in-law. He was always there with suggestions and moral support when needed. Paul's love of learning came from encouraging him at a young age to learn. When we lived in Chicago and our kids were all little, how they had so much fun playing with their Saba on Shabbos and having Shabbos and Yontif meals with him and going to his shul. He always showed the kids all his old-fashioned phones and other items that they enjoyed hearing about. When he'd come to visit, he and the kids enjoyed his company and they had fun spending time with him. When I last went to Chicago, it was wonderful to have meals with him and spend time together. He was always so positive and had a wealth of knowledge. He got so much simcha from being able to watch the live stream and Zoom of his grandchildren's weddings and celebrations. And it made him feel like he was there in person. He loved to see pictures of his grandchildren and his great-grandchildren. We will miss having him there for future weddings. Ayin Hara, you will always be with us in spirit. Right before he passed away, Chava showed him a picture of Yitzchak Asher, named after his father, Alav Shalom, being Shabbos Abba this past Shabbos, and that brought a smile to his face. Even though we were far away, he always felt like he was close. We will surely miss him and his advice and great suggestions and moral support. My brother, Kevin Azrael, is in Israel. Saba's focus was always towards Torah and Eretz Yisrael. He would love to talk to me in discussions of Torah. I remember about halacha in particular. He recorded shiurim that he heard in his youth, and he reviewed those Torah tapes in his later years. That is awesome. He serves as an inspiration to his family. Some of my first memories of Saba are him telling us to stand up straight in a Walmart. And he was always very good about us having good posture. And all these memories remind me that I feel like Saba never stood stronger and taller than when he was dancing at the live stream music of our weddings and celebrations. Saba reminding me to always stand tall. It's something that I tell my husband now. I think of him, and I'll think of him every time I remind someone to stand a little taller. And we miss him very much.
Just as an FYI, if I feel like I can't make this, my sister is ready to step in. Thank you, Julie. My Saba was an incredible man. He was a father and Saba to so many people. Saba enveloped and lived the ethos of kindness, compassion, hakaras hatov, simcha, encouragement, humility, and resilience. The past couple months, he was in increasingly greater pain. Nevertheless, he continued to always have others in mind, offering his own hospital food and doing the mitzvah b'chnesses orchim, even as a patient in the hospital. When he was in the ER in September and the care team diagnosed him with heart failure, I spoke to him about his situation. He turned to me and, in the bed, mustered a smile and said, Chava, I know you mean well and are an incredible granddaughter. You will make a fantastic nurse. That was how he responded while being in discomfort and upon hearing the awful news. Not yelling, not getting upset, not crying, not even making it about himself and his own feelings, which he rightfully should have, but instead on the other person, on me, on building me up and lifting me up and encouraging me. There were so many times where Saba did not make it about himself, but about the other person. I loved talking to him about my day, my schooling, my struggles, and my hopes. He handled everything with such sensitivity and chizuk, only in a way that a true Saba does. His commitment to mitzvos and halacha was incredible. Thursday morning, just, like less than 24 hours before his patira, he was still in a lot of pain. But even still, he wanted to wear his kippah. He always wanted to do mitzvos. It's going on walks with him was also a great pleasure. Getting to smell the outdoors and talk to his neighbor and breathe the fresh air was a big enjoyment of his. One time about a year ago, I went shopping with him, and among the other groceries he needed, he got the biggest kedem wine that they had. Even I struggled to carry it. As I'm heading out with him to walk everything back to their house with him, he pauses at the corner and says to me something along the lines of, "No, Chava, I want you to do your homework. I can manage." And then when I say to him, "Of course I'll walk you back," he says, "Are you sure you have the time?" Saba really was so invested in my schooling and my success that anything and everything else came secondary in his mind. Even when he was in the ER that first time in September, he still tried shooing me away to do homework. I will, Bezras Hashem, be a great nurse because of him and my incredible family support. His love and pride for his family was astonishing. At the hospital, a physical therapist asked Saba if he had a big family. And Saba responded, "Small family, but very close-knit." And I completely agree, Baruch Hashem. When he went to the ambulance 3 weeks ago via Hatzalah, the first thing he said when he got in the ambulance was, "Julie knows how to ride one of these things." He loved speaking to my dad, and I always remarked how hilarious it was to hear them on the phone talking to each other because they sounded like the exact same person with their way of speech and voices. My father went above and beyond to be present and supportive to Saba from afar. He wanted to hear every single update and involve Saba as much as possible in all conversations and cater to his needs. My father spoke so lovingly, calmly, and caringly to Saba so many times, giving Saba chizuk to keep going. When Saba went to the hospital a little over 3 weeks ago for the first admission, someone had to tell Saba that he would need to stay an extra day, even though he didn't want to. My dad broke the news to him on the phone, and by speaking to him so lovingly, calmly, and caringly to Saba, Saba didn't put up any fight after that. No one else could have gotten that result except for my dad. Immediately after discussing that need together, my Saba immediately asked my dad how he was feeling and gave him chizuk. Even not feeling well himself, Saba always wanted to be the best father and Saba possible. Saba loved my dad and always felt his presence and love from Las Vegas. I am sure, Be'ezras Hashem, that Saba knew that my dad did everything he possibly could for him and that he loves his son. The distance between them was just that, distance, but their love and care for each other was always palpable. He always asked about Julie and her work, Amy and her law school, Bashi and her well-being, and was so proud of his grandchildren, so proud of his daughter-in-law, my mom, and his grandchildren-in-laws, Sippy, Avi, and Judah. As for the Israeli contingency, he couldn't speak enough of their praises. He loved talking to Kevin and Sippy and hearing about their life in Eretz Yisrael. But even more than any of us, he loved his great-grandchildren. Even I could not compete with the cuteness of my nieces and nephews and Hadassah. His face lit up when he saw their pictures and videos, and when visitors came in the hospital to visit, he wanted to show them their pictures and show them off, Baruch Hashem. Although he never met my niece or nephews in person, that never took away from the great pride he had in being a great-grandfather to beautiful kiddos and feeling a connection to them. The morning before his patira, in lots and lots of pain and discomfort, I asked him if he would like to see a brand new picture of Chassia Devora, and he immediately said yes. I showed him for the picture, and for that brief moment, all there was in his eyes was his great-granddaughter. Nothing else mattered. In his final moments of complete consciousness, I showed him the most recent and brand new picture of Asher being Shabbos Abba at Gan, wearing a kippah and already being trained in doing mitzvos and following in the ways of his great Saba. And the other week, when I showed him a picture of Aaron, he said to me, "He is going to be such a good-natured kid." A lot of people have been telling me for months how amazing it is and how much I was doing for Saba. But I want everyone here to know that Saba did so much for me. From paying for my braces to driving to Skokie for my graduation party that Auntie Malka and Uncle Gary made for me, as well as emotionally giving me a feeling of purpose, of grounding, of chezuk, of love, among so many other things. It was truly a zechus and pleasure to have spent every second that I did with him. He was not just my Saba, but my friend. He did so much good for the community and for his family. He did so much chesed, some that many know, and some that very few people know, and some that probably nobody knows. He never wanted kavod for anything, and simply wanted to just do the right thing according to halacha. His humility, chesed, and love was at a level of another world. The past 2 weeks, Saba received excellent care at the hospital, Baruch Hashem. The nurse he had the night he passed was a Russian Jew. I said to my family, how beautiful it is that at the last hours of his life, he still enables someone else to do a mitzvah. For every moment that he is alive and receiving her care, she is getting to do the mitzvah of Bikkur Cholim. After he passed, I went to the nurse and told her thank you for all that she did for him. And she responded by saying, that was my mitzvah. Baruch Hashem, Hashem did such hashgacha to enable that to happen. I heard from Rabbi Zachariah Wallerstein Zitzal the following question. When someone passes, why do you mourn? You should be happy they are in Gan Eden. It's like leaving in the middle of winter in New York, or in our case, Chicago, to go to Miami. You shouldn't be crying, you should be celebrating. They're in a better place. And he responded that the reason you cry is because that unique person and what that person's potential and ability to accomplish is gone and can never be replaced. Saba truly went above and beyond his potential to make a huge impact on this world and perfect all his midos and im yirtzeh Hashem, his tikkun and mission in this world. I would like to ask everyone here the following. Although we cannot daven for Saba anymore for a refuah shalema, for a recovery, we can do things lulei nishmas to elevate his neshama. I would like to ask everyone here to take upon themselves one mitzvah or character trait to work on in his merit. Whether that be saying Shema with more concentration, as my Saba loved saying the Shema, saying thank you to the registered person at the counter, as Saba was incredible with hakaras hatov, gratitude, holding back a thought or comment that may be derogatory, as Saba always wanted to be respectful, always thinking of others, as Saba was the epitome of that, or even being a bit more outgoing and talking to the person next to you in the shul, at the doctor, or even waiting in line at the grocery store to make them feel not just like a body, but a person with meaning. As Saba loved talking to people and hearing of their whereabouts. One small change in his merit, Moshe Meir ben Isaac Asher. And Saba, I just want to say, I am so honored and grateful and privileged that you trusted me with your medical information, for allowing me to be by your side, for allowing me to care for you and be with you. From 2 a.m., Shabbos at 2 a.m. having ice cream together. And although I know that unfortunately you did not get to meet my Basheret and Zivug, I appreciate your chizuk. That you always had said to me that it'll do school and it'll work out. And I just hope, Bezras Hashem, that whoever and whenever he is, that you smile down from Shemayim and you put your stamp of approval. And I do hope that the wishes that which you told me that you wanted were catered to. And I love you so, so much, Saba. And you are the best Saba that anyone could possibly have.
Please rise. We'll ask Rabbi Tannenbaum, the rabbi of the Ark, who was very close to Marvin. Actually, Marvin used to go to his shiurim quite a bit. He used to walk over, when he could still walk over, he and his wife together. So at the very least, we want to ask you to say the Kamal Rachamim for him. I have it open if you want.
Moshe ben Yitzchak Asher. El Mere Rachamim, Shochein Bamromim, Hamzei Benucha Nechona, Kanfei Ashchina, B'malos Kedoshim Utarim, Kezor Harakia Mazhirim, Es Nishmas, Moshe Meir ben Isaac, Shalach, Isaac Usher. Shalach lulamo, vavor shenachnu mispalim bad haskoras nishmaso, began Eden te menuchaso, chen balarachamim, yastireu v'seisok nafav liolamim, yitzror, b'tzror achayim es nishmaso, adonoi unachaloso, yanuach b'shalom al mishkavo, nomar amen.
This concludes the funeral here at the chapel. The interment will be at Waldheim Cemetery. We ask for those that are not going to the cemetery to please leave the parking lot immediately so the procession can line up. For those who will be going to the cemetery, we ask that you go to your vehicles and will line up in front of our chapel. We ask that you have your headlights and headlights on while driving your procession to the cemetery, and please drive as close as safety permits to the vehicle in front of you. You received a service folder when you arrived, or you joined the website for the live stream. There's Shiva information on there with Shiva times and Minyanim times, so that information is there. The following individuals have been asked to act as pallbearers: Bob Israel, Sherwin Feldstein, Uncle Bernie, and all the grandsons. If we could have everybody come forward, all the pallbearers come forward, and we'll escort the caskets from the chapel. And if Bob Israel, Sharon Feldstein,